Okay, I want to just kind of be honest. Is this wasn't an episode I wasn't originally planning on recording. And the episode's going to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome. I've seen some people talk about that. And I think it's important to talk about because one thing is that I think any one of us in any point in our career probably has felt that in some way, shape, or form. And it's something that I kind of had to take a look at and feel like, okay, how do I feel about that in this space? And what does that mean to me? Right. I think, talking about it out loud kind of feels like you're in some way admitting that you feel you're kind of saying like, hey, I don't know this thing or I don't belong. But that's kind of the point of all this is that syndrome or however you want to talk about it, it really thrives in silence. It's a voice that's telling you, you don't belong here. You don't know this thing or you're faking it until someone finds out. And I've felt this a number of different times, right? Across a lot of different things. And I think it's important for us to be confident in what we do and know the things we do well and, all of that. So today I'm not going to give you like 5 steps to cure this. I'm just going to share my own experiences and kind of have that conversation out loud. And hopefully this helps you too, because no matter if you're growing in your own career, transitioning from moving from college into the workplace, learning new skills, and you're trying something new, and maybe you didn't, you don't feel like you know it that well. That's totally fine. So I'm just going to lay those things out for how I feel about it and kind of how I've worked on that over the course of my career. And I think it's a good conversation to have because I put a lot of information out there and I don't know it all. And so let's just kind of have that conversation. So there's a few areas I just kind of wanted to lay out there that are things that, certainly I feel as I go out into the world and talk about these things in this space as well. I think there's 5 that are important, but I think rewinding back earlier into my career, I never learned, programming properly. I don't know if there is a proper way to learn programming, which is why I like to talk about it because I was able to learn just doing these things online. Right. But I walked in, I had built things with JavaScript. I had learned web programming and stuff like that. But it wasn't like I went to a boot camp or a school or anything kind of official that taught me these ways to do things. But somehow I was able to kind of piece it together. Right. And doing that process before we get into like the 5 things that I look at today, that gave me a ton of confidence that I could actually figure stuff out. Right. This isn't so much about the right or wrong way of doing things. It's about getting to the end goal and doing the work to actually learn and be able to put into practice kind of what you want to do. But like I said, I went into situations where I had a very traditional GIS background and I was talking about and trying to do things that I didn't know how to do. And that certainly felt, kind of scary at times, but putting in the work to learn the way to do those things and actually get out of it, that process, doing the things and being uncomfortable, trying and failing, helped me gain a lot of confidence. So what I want to say before we get into that is you should feel good about taking steps forward. Even if it feels like you're not making progress, that path of learning and excelling and changing is the one that will give you the confidence. And I've been through that for years. It took me years to learn all this stuff or to even get to where I am. And I'm still learning today. Let's not get that wrong in any way, shape, or form. But this is stuff that I want to give you the confidence that going through the steps and doing that and learning can help you a lot. So here's I wrote down the 5 things that I feel still kind of like, if I had to classify my imposter syndrome, these are the 5 things I feel. So let's start with the first one. So the first one is just education, right? I was fortunate to go to a great school, go to a great geography program and learn a lot. But that's where my formal education stopped. I have an undergraduate degree. I don't have a master's. I don't have a formal GIS degree. My degree is in geography and sociology. So if you look at what I did, that's what I studied. And I took a lot of courses in, some GIS type of work. It was heavily focused on cartography and heavily focused on web cartography at the time, which was like kind of the predominant way things were happening. So I didn't go to school to learn SQL or Python or JavaScript or any programming. And I didn't go forward from there either. I don't have a master's. I didn't learn spatial data science. I don't have a formal, training in statistics or anything like that. So, I really have this like simple baseline education. And for me, that can feel kind of tricky, especially when I've given presentations to PhDs and I kind of sit there and wonder, why do you want to listen to me talk about these things? And what do I have to teach you? It can feel really strange because these are people solving problems at scales that I just, I haven't done. There's working on climactic issues around the world. There's people that have, been to the Arctic and Antarctic, and there's me who just has, kind of this baseline of like, I've done some work to understand data types and things like that and cloud native files, but hey, I don't have the degrees and the check marks. That's one big thing for me. That's like, I don't have that kind of like formal education background. I've looked at it, as I've candidly, like, it's kind of been a kind of thing that's nagged at me for years of like, oh, should I go look at this? Should I go back to a master's? And each time I've kind of said, can I try to figure this out on my own? And, sometimes I have, but it's one of those things where it's like, hey, I don't have that same kind of formal degree certification I can hold up and says, yes, that I have. But that being said, what I tend to fall back on is I'm incredibly proud of the education I have, incredibly proud of the place that I went, the people I learned with, the people I learned from, and it gave me the base that I built from there. So I have to fall back to that every time. But that's one thing, if it can feel a little bit daunting when you're talking to people that have PhDs in computer science or, geography, climate, any of these different areas that are just, they've done way more work in that space than I have. So the second one, and this may sound surprising to some of you, is actually around, using Esri tools. I used Esri through my formal education up until about 2010. And since then, I haven't used it for anything kind of for what it's called production. I've looked at it, I've played around with these things, I've downloaded trials of this stuff, but I've never used it. And so much of our geospatial community exists in that software that it almost feels like I'm on the outside looking in. Sometimes, there's a certain amount of like, when you see all the people like, the user conference, you're like, oh, I don't feel like I'm a part of that club or something, which I feel is kind of unfortunate. I interact with a ton of people that use Esri, of course, and then actually people that work at Esri. And, so I'm able to have that dialogue, but I'm not like, I'm kind of on the outside looking in of like, oh, I'm using these open tools in this space and stuff like that. So, there's a weird thing where I'm like, I love the work I do and I love the tools I do and I pick the right tools for the job. Right? When I'm doing data engineering and data processing, I'm using the right pieces for that. If I'm, doing more analytics and dashboarding, I can pick up the pieces I need and I feel incredibly comfortable. And there's this whole freeing feeling on the same time that I can kind of build what I want and do that. But at the same time, it's kind of like, oh man, I'm not a part of that club. And it's not, there's a weird thing. I don't know if that's just me, but that's one thing I've always said is like, oh, you don't use Esri? And they kind of get that weird look. I'm like, no, I don't, but it's okay, right? Right? So it's another thing that kind of pops out there. I'm like, I was really glad to have some conversations with folks that use Esri, and I want to open that dialogue more, talking about those things and see how we can kind of create a world where, hey, both things are good and we just know how to choose the right things for the right job and stuff like that. So that's just another one. It's like I said, it might sound strange, because I don't talk about it a lot, but it's one of those things. Hey, you're in GIS and geospatial, but you don't use Esri. That kind of it's something I think we need to change a dynamic of, and I hope that I can help do a little bit of that too. So the third one is actually around like certifications, right? I don't have any formal like certifications, be it cloud, and I've never taken a cloud kind of certification track. There's those for AWS and Google and stuff like that. I don't have any, kind of formal like, things unless there's, the programs I've created and I've taken, I've kind of, gone through the certification track there, but it kind of feels like, hey, I built the educational material and stuff like that. But it feels very strange to be building educational material sometimes and you're not like, oh, you're not formally certified. Right. But that's why I do that, because there's such a gap in like the certifications that we can provide. Right. I feel like there's a massive gap in terms of saying you can get certifiable skills in geospatial, in modern GIS, in cloud native geospatial, and spatial processing, and data analytics or data science or data engineering. We need a better way to formalize what those skills look like. And I'm going to do another episode where I actually kind of look at some job postings. But if you look at the broader data space, data analytics is well defined and what those roles look like. Data engineering, those roles are very defined and it's clear what they look like. DevOps, machine learning engineer. These are all roles that are very clearly defined. When you shift into geospatial, you might see a posting for geospatial data engineer and geospatial data scientist and things like that. But the workload is going to look relatively the same for what it is, right? It's going to look like it's the exact same kind of thing. And I think like that, I don't have these certifications and I kind of created it as a vacuum of like, well, these things should exist. Like we can get certified in data engineering in the cloud, but why not? Why can't we get certified for data engineering for geospatial? And that's one thing I want to work on as well. But it's weird because I haven't achieved any of those myself. And under that same topic, like I look at this and like, when I talk about education, I'm not a computer scientist. I never took a course in computer science. And I see a lot of folks are like, should I take a computer science track? Is that what I need to study to learn this stuff? And I don't know. Like it feels weird because like there's a certain level that I would have to like, I've never gotten to. Like if you look at lead code, right? I don't know any of that stuff, right? I'm just gonna be totally honest with you. Like stuff that if I tried to figure it out, maybe I could do, but like those deep algorithms and stuff like that, it's just, I don't get into that. I get into the practical use of the technology and building and writing code to actually make things go, right? That's what I'm passionate about. But at the same time, it feels like, oh, well, because I don't know this kind of sorting or this type of thing, or I didn't, go to computer science and take these courses or get that degree. There's just a certain like level of like when you exist in the tech world, it feels like you need that in some way. I don't know if that's the case or not anymore, but it's something I've just kind of had a chip on my shoulder about for some time. Now I've been able to like, I feel very confident in my skills, and I say this just because of that, because I can, I've done a lot and I feel like I'm proud of that work, but at the same time, it's just something that I've never done from that perspective and gotten out there as well. And I think kind of the final thing for me is kind of, to sum all of this up is, I'm, how do I put this? I'm doing and talking about technical topics, but no one's kind of said, you're the person to talk about this. No one's kind of given me permission. And I don't even know if you need that in this space anymore. But as someone who's, gone and learned and developed, and now I'm talking to thousands of people, creating free resources on YouTube, creating lessons and guiding in the Spatial Lab and doing these different things. Sometimes it feels like no one's giving me like the badge, the proof, the kind of the blessing to go talk about that. And that's probably the weirdest part about all of this is kind of sitting on, just being candid, me on the other side of the camera, kind of talking to you about these things and trying to teach it as many people as possible. No one's giving me that kind of like, hey, you're doing this. You have achieved the ability to do this for some way, shape, or form. And the reason I all started this is because I like doing this stuff and I like sharing about it, and then eventually more people wanted to learn, and I'm so excited that I get to spend a lot of my time teaching people to do that, and then also building technologies that help advance that, like the stuff we're all doing at Whereabouts. All the stuff I could teach, it just helps you push that forward so much faster. And I love doing all those things, but it's also, like I said, it's kind of strange. Like who gave me permission to do this? Who gave me permission to write a book about this stuff? Who's telling me that's okay? So, and I don't know if that comes in the form, I don't know what form that even comes in. Like, you see people, if they get, symbolic like awards or certifications, or I've achieved this or that or the other thing. I don't even know if those things exist for this space, which is, like I said, why I created some of the certifications, so you can validate the stuff that you do. But more increasingly, like I said, why I felt like kind of the permission to do this, if we boil it down to that, is I saw other people in different data spaces that are creating and doing really good stuff. I've been kind of, nascently kind of in those communities following people, but there's great people that come from completely different backgrounds that are now sharing and teaching others. And there's a power in community. There's a power in sharing and talking with each other that I really started to latch on to. And that just kind of started from 2021 till now to grow these different things, and I think that's the really cool part about this. There's lots of different folks that are creating content in data analytics. There's some, definitely some people I'll mention here below. If you're like, hey, I want to learn about data analytics, these are people who come from data engineering is another one, data science. There's these folks that come from some traditional backgrounds, some non-traditional backgrounds that are doing all of this type of stuff. One person that does this really well is like Avery Smith, and he does a great job at talking about this, sharing some of the challenges, things like that. There's folks that are doing this, from Google. There are people that have come from, data engineering and built, amazing careers and stuff like that. Just being able to see people that, are saying, hey, I know how to do this, and I'm hoping I can help you too. That's kind of why I started to do that. So it's, it's weird because like, I don't think I need permission to do this, but at the same time, it's one of those last little chips that says, who gave me the ability to do this? But to sum all that up, I want to put this out there. So if you ever feel like a blocker in any of these different things, I don't know coding, so I can't learn it. I have to go back to school, or no one at work gave me permission to write SQL or something like that. Or no one, said I can't apply for this job because I don't have the right check mark. That's kind of what I want to break down, to say, yes, you can. These are the ways to learn it. Here's resources on how to do that. Here's ways for you to certify to show that you know that. and then take that out in the world and start to do that. That's what I hope I can bring forward. And I felt kind of like it made sense to be really honest about those things that I feel so that maybe you can kind of relate to that as well. That's all I wanted to do with this. But if you resonate with this at all, let me know. Kind of, share some thoughts in the comments. If you're feeling that way or anything like that, share a comment. There's discussions we have about this in the Spatial Lab. If you want to check that out and kind of share, I'll do a post over there and you can kind of check that out and communicate with others around that as well. But just know that there's lots of people out there like you. You're the background, no matter where you come from, you're smart, you know what you're doing. And if no one's giving you the permission to try challenging things or learn them or do them, do it because I know you can. And that's kind of all I want to say with that. So yeah, that was it. Thanks for sticking around. I hope this was helpful. And yeah, I'll see you in a future episode.